And welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is joy is key. That joy is a feedback mechanism that lets us know that we're in greater alignment with the song of our soul. And it's a way that we can find our way. When we look at what lights us up, that's key to creating joy. And it's also a wonderful key to our essential being. So we'll discuss this at length today. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells and your organs, and bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, rub our palms vigorously against one another, feel all that sensation, the friction, the energy moving, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome. Good morning, Isabel. So good to have you here with us this morning. So we're talking about joy is key. And this comes from a conversation that I had yesterday. Oh, good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us. So we're talking about joy is key. And this comes from a conversation yesterday where I was speaking with someone who's an activist and very, very socially engaged. Good morning, Bernadette. Welcome. So good to have you here. Today, we're talking about joy is key. So I was talking to this person who's very socially active. And what I mean by that is supporting their community that's going through a lot of struggle, and they're doing all kinds of businesses and very active in environmental causes and just not really feeling it, just not really feeling the joy of it, not feeling engaged. It's more like it's obligation and duty. And they were mentioning that the things that they really enjoy doing are, being outside, being with their animals, being in nature, and their interpretation of these things that gave them so much joy was that they were frivolous. That in other words, joy is a waste of time, or joy is self-indulgent and frivolous. And I tend to heartily disagree. And we had a conversation last night on the movie night for Sustainability Now about what kind of world are we creating? As people who are very concerned about creating a better world, people who are aware of what we're doing to the planet, knowing that something's got to give, that things have got to change. And this was a revelation that this person came to, in fact, when we are feeling the urgency of everything that needs to be done, everything that needs to be corrected, and we're feeling the intensity of that burden. What comes up is this experience of burden and heaviness and negativity and guilt and sorrow and all kinds of emotions that are of a pretty low frequency, right? And so one of my premises is that we get to create a world that we want to be living in. Good morning, Gia. So good to have you here with us. Welcome. We're talking about joy is key. So what we want to do is to create a world that we want to live in. The world that we currently reside in gives us all kinds of reason to be pretty negative or hopeless, or when we focus on the problems, and I'm not saying we don't have challenges, we do, but when we focus on the problems and try to fix whatever it is that's already existing, what happens is that we're bound by the energy of whatever that is, and the solutions that we arrive at are going to be kind of dictated by the boundaries of the problem that we're perceiving. And this is very different. I'm not saying that the issues don't get to be addressed. What I'm saying is it's a very different perspective from generating something to move toward, instead of trying to fix something that's broken or trying to move away from something that is broken or undesirable, to be creating something new, to be generating something to move toward. And so this notion of joy, what's happening is when we put our attention on the things that light us up, my hypothesis is that it brings us closer to our unique expression, that it brings us closer to the song of our soul that we came here to express. It invigorates, it enlivens. And what we want with that enlivenment, that we can be generative, we can be creative. And so I wonder, and I'm believing more and more, that if we can hold ourselves in a space of enthusiasm, if we follow the things that light us up, if we follow the things that give us joy, that those things are key to the discovery and exploration and experience of our unique soul song. That it's a bit of feedback for us to recognize, that brings us closer to the fuller expression of what we each uniquely came here to express through these individual instruments. So let's imagine that we are instruments in an orchestra, in a cosmic orchestra, and each instrument has its own unique characteristics and its own tone and timbre and frequency and vibration. And so discovering the uniqueness of that instrument is moving us further toward being able to play our part in that symphony At least that's my imagination here. So Rosalind says, why does it come? Oh, I love it. Why does it come so easily to kids to do joy compared to adults? Maybe because as adults, the desire gets hampered from how am I going to make that happen? Oh, Rosalind, I think we're so trained out of joy. I really do. I had an experience. I don't know if I talked to you guys about this or not, but it was just kind of an appalling experience to me. I was very exuberant, and I associate joy, childlike joy and exuberance. I associate together. I was very lit up about a couple people that I just recently met, and I was seeing the potential for these remarkable synergies with these people. And I expressed my excitement about that to a friend, and the friend said, "Be careful." And I felt like I felt like a kid. Excuse me. I felt like a kid with this shiny balloon that was, with a wonderful ribbon string that I was so excited about. And I felt like that person just came and put a pin in that balloon and popped. It was such a jolt. It was really interesting, actually. And so it prompted me to say, where's that coming from? Like, be careful, because why? Because there's a threat. What's the threat? Like, it's sort of projecting fear into that moment of joy or exuberance. And then what came up was that they actually said, well, you get so excited about things. I just want to make sure that you're paying attention and not making rash decisions. And I said, so you think my exuberance, my joy, my enthusiasm means that I'm not paying attention, or that I'm not able to see the potential pitfalls? That my exuberance means that I'm no longer rational, reasonable, or discerning. It was so interesting. It's like, well, you get so excited, you get so enthusiastic. Like, it reminds me very much of the prejudice against emotion and the arguments that have been leveled historically against women, because women are too emotional. And if you're emotional, then you can't possibly be rational. You can't possibly make reasoned decisions, right? So I think, getting back around to your comment, Rosalind, I think it's easy for kids to be joyful and playful because they're not being told, meter yourself, be careful. It's not safe. I think that that children haven't been conditioned into the prejudice against emotion that so many of us experience. I remember growing up, I would say that I am a highly sensitive person, and my family, I believe, really experienced my emotion or my sensitivity as a deficit, and associated that with weakness. Now, I know a bunch of you are highly sensitive people and highly emotional, and tuned in. And I would venture to say that emotionality does not correlate with weakness in any way. In fact, to be able to bear the intensity of an emotional spectrum takes some internal mettle to be able to experience the pain and on the other side the ecstasy, but to have that range of emotion, it's not for the faint of heart. It takes strength and courage to be willing to face a lot of emotions and the things that we confront through our more sensitive perceptions. So it's really interesting, how finally we're coming to a deeper appreciation and acknowledgement for emotional intelligence, which is really interesting. But we can look at how historically emotionality was considered hysteria. Women that were emotional or depressed or emotive were considered hysterics, right? And dismissed as if there was no reason for their experience. So Bernadette says it comes from a place of love without judgment. So I'm not sure what exactly you're referring to, Bernadette, but I'm thinking that you're maybe talking about joy, that it's an interesting thought to be looking at the connection between love and joy. I'm just thinking of the word discernment and how discernment is such an important thing. Oh, okay. So Bernadette says at one point titled a witch and put to death. Yeah. I think a lot of us have an affinity to that story of, being stoned to death or burned to death or drowned or tortured in various ways for being expressive of or being connected even to our sensitivities, to our awarenesses, to our knowing. And it's so interesting how many healer people I work with that have that memory or have deep issues about making their voice heard or being seen, because being seen has been associated with, in the past, being squashed. And it may be that we just are more sensitive to the collective memory around that, or it may be that there is such a thing as past lives. I don't know. Some people might argue that, but I really truly don't know. Or parallel dimensions. But this notion of our truest expression being something that brought with it a death sentence. So how's that for quashing your expression, right? So Bernadette says being different from others and feeling the compassion for another makes most of us not acceptable. Interesting, Bernadette. So I think that there's a shift that's taking place. Certainly when I was growing up, that might have been more the case. And maybe when you were growing up, I see that there is more compassion's becoming more popular. Sensitivity and emotionality is gaining some positive traction. When we talk about emotional intelligence rather than hysteria. That's a wonderful evolution. Bernadette says, I'm sure I was rich in a past life. Don't remember it, but definitely feel robed. Interesting. Well, it would make sense. This is interesting. I came across a comment around past lives yesterday saying that's why so many people have the same memory of the same past life, is that maybe there's this, and I believe there is this morphic field that we all, or this collective consciousness that we all tap into, and different elements of that awareness resonate differently for different people. And so maybe it shows up as the experience of a past life. Bernadette says, is it compassion or just wanting to be counted and heard? LOL. I think it's probably both. And I think we get to move from an either or perspective on life and experience to a both and. Like, it's this and that. You and I have the same, let's say we're experiencing an event together, and it's not that I'm right and you're wrong, it's that we're both right in our own perspectives, and how from that place do we then generate something that can unify us. So I've told you guys about this course I'm taking called the Regenerative Practitioner Series, and they talk about a triad with an activating force, a restraining force, and then a reconciling force that is generated by the activating and the restraining forces. So bringing those two elements together, it's possible to generate a third that is a kind of a transcendence of the limits of the polarity. It's like a unification, reconciliation, or a regeneration of something new. So when we say, is it this or that? If it were both, what new might come from that? What might we be able to generate from that previous dichotomy that would create some kind of unifying and generative third option? This is the third way, so to speak. So getting back to joy is key. When we do things we enjoy, if we find ourselves judging those things as frivolous, I think we get to look at what is life about? What is life about? If the things that make us joyful are frivolous, then what's the point? So something, we're talking about the world that we want to create versus the world that we exist in. We are socially conditioned to revere suffering and struggle, and to dismiss joy and pleasure and ease. And how twisty is that? I mean, wouldn't it be lovely to live in a joyful world instead of a world where we're struggling and suffering, and that's elevated as meritorious in some way? It's crazy. Bernadette says, understanding the difference and being okay. Yes. So when we're talking about people with different vantage points, being able to recognize that your truth and my truth, and I'm not talking about alternate facts, I'm saying in the same situation, your truth and my truth are both present and real as our truths. but it's not truth with a capital T. So the key, one of the keys, joy is the key, or is a key, certainly. And one of the keys to experience joy or experiencing joy is to give ourselves permission to value joy. And I have to tell you, joy wasn't even in my vocabulary for most of my life. It wasn't something that I valued at all. It wasn't on my radar. And I'm coming into awareness around how it's a really important metric of how connected we are to ourselves. You know, joy comes from alignment with oneself and being present to the drive, the impulse and drive to express our vitality. So, you know, I have to say it's quite interesting to see that radical shift in my awareness around joy. I used to believe that joy was frivolous as well. I did. And I'm just realizing, just remembering that actually, that I sort of had a disdain for joy, you know, as a priority. And now I get it. Like when we are in our element, when we are in alignment and expressing our essential being, there is a joy to that. There is a natural exuberance to that. And it's sort of a confirmation of that alignment. So that's the conversation for today around joy. I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. It's Friday. It's nice to start a Friday with joy and take that into the weekend. Yes. So I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming here on the Enlightened World Network, as well as on Enlightened World Living and EWN One with the Earth. And it is always my pleasure and privilege to be with you guys. I so appreciate your participation, your presence, your willingness to entertain these thoughts. So thank you guys. Have a wonderful weekend. And I hope to see you again here really, really soon.